from the rain and snow, trying to forget but I won't let go. Looking at a crowded street, listening to my own heartbeat. So many people all around the world. Tell me, where do I find someone like you, girl? Take me to your heart, take me to your soul. Give me your hand before I'm old. Show me what lovers haven't got a clue. Show me that wonders can't be true. They say nothing lasts forever. We're only here today. Love is now or never. Bring me far away. Take me to your heart, take me to your soul. Give me your hand and hold me. Show me what love is. Be my guiding star. It's easy. Take me to your heart.
Hello, my brothers and sisters. There's a great change today. Hello, my brothers and sisters. If you can't tell, there is a great change today. I'm not speaking in Spanish once. I'll be speaking in English. I'll be sharing the Word of God because there are some people who, they don't speak Spanish. So I'll be preaching in English for today. Well, let's begin. Today we will be going over the words of God, the Bible. The Bible is a collection of books compiled together over millions of centuries, millions of years. There were many people who were writing the Bible. It wasn't only one person who God's like, hey, write the Bible. It was millions. Many, many people. We had shepherds and princes. We had writers, we had fishermen, we had so many different types of people sharing these words of the Lord God. Well, let's not waste any more time, and let's begin. In 7 days, says the book of Genesis, God created the firmament of the heavens and the earth, and all the living things. He then decided to make man in his own image, after his own likeness. God created man of the dust of the ground and, according to Genesis 2:7, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. This is reflected in Adam's name. The root Adama in Hebrew means earth. But Adam was lonely, so God created Eve. They were both naked, but their innocence prevented them from experiencing shame or knowing good and evil. The Lord then planted a garden in Eden, with every tree that is pleasant for the sight and good for food. And in this garden he put the man whom he had formed. The meaning of the word Eden is uncertain, although a Babylonian cuneiform tablet used it as a term for uncultivated plain. Other scholars see the Aramaic word for well-watered as its source. Many centuries later, during the Babylonian exile, when the Genesis tradition came under Persian influence, the Garden of Eden acquired a new name: paradise. The term is rooted in the old Persian word pardis, which means walled or protected enclosure, usually referring to the park-like estates maintained for the king's comfort. Regardless of where this mythical Shangri-La may have existed, the description in the Bible leaves little doubt about the true significance of Eden. It was everything that the harsh Arabian desert was not. The Garden of Eden had lots of trees, and Adam was encouraged to eat from every branch except from the branches of the so-called tree of knowledge and of good and evil. "In the day that you eat of it," God warned, "you shall surely die." Genesis 2:17. As long as Adam was content to live in a state of perpetual innocence, all of his physical needs would be met. Soon, however, a serpent came slithering onto the scene. He approached Eve and asked her, "Did God say, 'You shall not eat from any tree in the garden'?" Genesis 3:1. "No," Eve told the serpent. "We can eat freely of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the garden's middle, God told us we cannot eat it, nor even touch it, lest you die." The serpent then revealed why God didn't want Adam and Eve to partake from the tree. "For God knows that on the day that you eat thereof, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil." Genesis 3:3-5. The meaning of this story may be that by pursuing knowledge and science, man becomes conscious of himself and his role in the universe, but loses his innocence in the process. Immortality, on the other hand, offers life without death, but it is a life devoid of self-awareness and free will. Eve succumbed to the serpent's temptation. She ate from the tree and made sure that Adam did as well. And then, says the book of Genesis, the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked. Genesis 3:7. To cover their shame, they sewed fig leaves together as garments. And then they were exiled. Both Adam and Eve were evicted from paradise and its rich source of food. They were forced to sustain themselves by tilling the ground. Genesis 3:23. Wait, hold on. I skipped a page. Give me a good second. Alright. Hold on, I keep on skipping a page. There's no way that... Okay, whatever. Now. Wait, I feel like I skipped something. I definitely skipped something. Give me a good second. Alright. Oh, sorry about this interruption. I don't know where I left off. Both Adam and Eve were evicted from paradise and its rich source of food. They were forced to sustain themselves by tilling the ground. Genesis 3:23. A biblical reference to the moment when agriculture and husbandry became the mainstay of human existence. For the Bible, the story of Eden underscores the fact that the human existence is merely an exile from a primordial state of divine perfection. Eve gave birth to two sons, Cain, a farmer, and Abel, a shepherd. Cain killed his brother and was cast out. He eventually settled in a land east of Eden named Nod. There he married a woman who would bear him a son named Enoch. Meanwhile, Eve gave birth to another son named Seth. Many generations after Seth, a man named Noah was born. The earth's population had begun to multiply, but God found that mankind had become too wicked, too evil, too bad, and decided to destroy his creation with a great flood. "For I am sorry that I have made them." Genesis 6:7. Only Noah and his family would be saved from the cataclysm that would soon engulf the world. The meaning of the name Noah is not entirely clear. In the Jewish tradition, Noah is believed to derive from Niham, meaning he gave comfort to his people. Whereas in the Islamic tradition, Na, based on the verb naha, is believed to mean he wailed for his people. God chose Noah and his family as the only humans to be saved from the coming why do you have to torture me with these words? Cataclysm. The instrument of their salvation was a boat, a very large ship made of gopher wood and covered in pitch. God provided detailed specifications of how this ark should be built. The length of the ark, 300 cubits, its width, 50 cubits, and its height, 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark, and finish it to a cubit above. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every kind. Genesis 6:15-19. Since the Genesis description does not refer to rudder or sails, it's possible that the ark was not meant to be navigated, but merely carried by the waters under the protective hand of God. When at last the great ship was finished, Noah went in with his family, including his sons' wives, and a pair of every living thing of flesh, male and female, and every kind of bird, and every kind of cattle, and every kind of creeping thing. Genesis 6:19-20. Then for 40 days and nights, God sent down rain, and all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. Genesis 7:11-12. A description that some scholars interpret as the exact reversal of the original creation sequence. The waters swelled so high that even the mountains were covered. Only after 150 days did God cause a mighty wind to blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. Eventually, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, Genesis 8:4. Noah opened the window of the ark and set out a raven, which flew to and fro. He then sent out 3 doves in succession. The first could not find a resting place and returned to the ark. The second one flew back with an olive leaf in its beak, and the third never returned. Noah then decided it was safe to set foot on earth. Genesis 8:6-12. In gratitude for their deliverance, Noah built an altar and sacrificed a specimen of every clean animal and of every clean bird as burnt offerings. And God pledged never again to destroy mankind. He entered into a covenant with Noah and his successors that reiterated his original blessing to Adam, while also anticipating a future covenant with Moses. As a visible sign of that covenant, he placed a rainbow in the clouds. In one of the more mysterious passages of the Bible, the Noah story is preceded by the appearance of the sons of God, who saw that the daughters were fair, and they took wives for themselves. Genesis 6:2. The term sons of God is not clear. One interpretation holds that the verse refers to demigods who cohabited with mortal women. The Genesis says that their offspring, known as the Nephilim, would return in the books of Numbers and giants living in Canaan. Numbers 13:33. One of the Dead Sea Scrolls, 4Q417, however, refers to the Nephilim as children of Seth, whom God had condemned. This may support the view that the sons of God refers to fallen angels who cross the great divide between heaven and earth. Job 1:6-1. According to the Genesis story, the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of all people of the earth. The children of Japheth populated Greece and Asia Minor, whereas the descendants of Ham emerged in North Africa and Mesopotamia. Most important, however, one of Noah's great-grandsons, Nimrod, went on to found the city of Babel. Genesis presents Nimrod as a powerful man, the first on earth to become a mighty warrior, a mighty hunter before the Lord, though his actual warlike exploits are not described. Genesis 10:8-9. Some authors have tried to identify him as a deity in Mesopotamian mythology, such as the chief god Marduk, who created the earth in 7 days, or King Gilgamesh of Sumeria. Babel was not the only place Nimrod created. He also established a kingdom in Shinar, which the prophet Micah would later associate with Assyria, Micah 5:6. Genesis implies that Nimrod also built the cities of Akkad and Erech, which is usually identified as the Sumerian city of Uruk. Akkad has been associated with a city known as Agade, later known as Akkad, the capital of the Akkadian Empire, founded by King Sargon, 2334 to 2279 BCE. The remains of these prehistoric settlements have been excavated in today's Iraq. But it is Babel in which Genesis sets the next part of its story. The name Babel is probably inspired by the great city of Babylon, founded in the 1960s BCE by the Amorites, a group of people who originally hailed from Syria, Canaan. This was a time, says Genesis, when the whole earth had one language and the same words. And the people of Babel developed the technology of making bricks from baked clay, Genesis 11:1. What to do with this marvelous invention? What should they build, a temple or a palace for the king? Like many other nations in human history, both ancient and modern, the people of Babel decided to reach for the skies. Come, they said, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name for ourselves. Genesis 11:4. Of course, this project did not remain hidden from God for long. He came down to see the city and the tower that they had built. Look, he said, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Therefore, rather than destroying this monstrous structure, God decided to confuse their language there, so that they will not understand each other's speech. Genesis 11:6-7. Unable to communicate, the proud builders left the city and were scattered abroad. For the Bible, this is the meaning of the name Babel, using one of the many double entenders in the Genesis tradition, because the Akkadian word Bab-Ili refers to the gate of the gods, while Balal in Hebrew means sowing confusion, like in the English Babel. The story of the Tower of Babel was likely inspired by the stepped pyramids or ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Their main purpose was to create a mediating space between the gods and humankind. Because the Earth's laws of gravity are universal, this led to a pyramidal form, though the Mesopotamian solution differed from Egyptian pyramids. One of the best preserved ziggurats is the one at Ur, which was excavated by British archaeologist Leonard Woolley, I hope I said that correctly, in the 1920s. Forgive me if I didn't say that correctly. 9 generations after Noah, there lived a man named Terah in Ur of the Chaldeans. He had 3 sons, one of whom was Abram. Terah took his family from Ur to the city of Haran in northern Mesopotamia. When he died, God called upon Abram and said, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." Genesis 12:1. Haran was located in northern Mesopotamia, in what is today's southern Turkey. When Terah died in this city, his son Abram, later known as Abraham, became the leader of their clan. God then called upon Abraham and told him to go to Canaan. "I will make of you a great nation," God said, Genesis 12:1-2. Abraham obeyed and traveled down to Canaan, together with his wife, Sarah, then still called Sarai. He also took his nephew Lot, the son of his deceased brother, for Sarah was childless. But there was a famine in Canaan, and Abraham traveled to Egypt in the hope of finding provisions for his family. While there, he became a wealthy man because Pharaoh was besotted with Sarah and bestowed on them many gifts. But after Abraham returned to Canaan, he found that there were insufficient grazing lands for his now greatly expanded herd, and the clan was split up. Lot left for the fertile plains of the Jordan and settled in a place called Sodom. Abraham eventually pitched his tents in Hebron, located in the southern part of today's West Bank. Lot's departure left Abraham without an heir. Since Sarah was barren, she selected an enslaved girl named Hagar and told her to lie with Abraham so as to procure a son. Hagar conceived and gave birth to a son named Ishmael. When the boy turned 13, God reaffirmed his covenant that Abraham would become the ancestor of a multitude of nations, Genesis 17:4. To seal this covenant, God told Abraham to circumcise himself as well as Ishmael and all the male members of his household. Ever since each male baby born to Jewish parents is circumcised on the 8th day after birth. But then Sarah conceived as well and bore a son named Isaac. This raised an urgent question. Who would Abraham recognize as his heir? Sarah insisted that it should be Isaac and demanded that her husband cast out the slave woman with her son. Genesis 21:10. Abraham complied. Meanwhile, God had decided to punish two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, for their sinful ways. But Abraham's nephew Lot still lived in Sodom. Would the Lord relent? Abraham pleaded. If 10 good men could be found there. God agreed. Luckily, Genesis 18:33. But then 2 angels sent to Sodom were threatened with rape. With its destruction imminent, the angel led Lot and his family out of the city before sulfur and fire rained down from heaven. Lot's wife, unable to contain her curiosity, looked back and she became a pillar of salt. Genesis 19:24 and 26. Isaac grew to become a healthy boy, but God decided to put Abraham to a test. He told Abraham, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. Genesis 22:2. With a heavy heart, Abraham complied, but just before he struck the blade to kill his son, an angel intervened. Relieved beyond words, Abraham offered a ram instead. In time, Abraham decided that a suitable wife for Isaac be brought from Haran, where the rest of his family was still living. This was a young woman named Rebekah, Isaac's second cousin. Isaac took Rebekah, says Genesis, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Genesis 24:67. Rebekah gave birth to twins. Esau, the stronger of the two, was covered in red hair, whereas Jacob was a gentle lad who gripped Esau's heel at birth. The root of the word Yaakov is Akev, meaning heel, and the word Yaakov is Jacob. Jacob was Rebekah's favorite, though Isaac favored Esau. Rebekah wondered how Jacob could inherit the birthright, Bechorah, the rights of the firstborn son to their father's heritage. She dressed Jacob in Esau's coat and thus deceived Isaac, who was nearly blind, into blessing Jacob. As soon as Esau found out, he was furious, and so Rebekah sent Jacob away to Haran to safety. One night, while traveling to Haran, Jacob fell asleep and dreamed of a ladder going up into heaven. At the top stood God, reaffirming his covenant. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. Genesis 28:13. When he woke up, Jacob anointed the stone on which he had slept with oil and called the altar Bethel, the house of God. Once in Haran, Jacob worked for his cousin Laban and eventually married both of his daughters, the beautiful Rachel and her older sister, Leah. Leah bore Jacob 7 children, 6 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, and a daughter, Dinah. Jacob's concubine Bilhah gave birth to Dan and Naphtali, while another enslaved person, Zilpah, gave him Gad and Asher. Genesis 30, 3-8, 9-13. Rachel gave birth to a boy named Joseph, Genesis 30, 22-24, and later Benjamin. Together with the sons of Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim, these sons would become the forefathers of the 12 tribes of Israel, thus sealing God's great covenant. When at last he returned home to Canaan, Jacob came upon a stranger near the Jabbok River, an angel of the Lord, or perhaps God himself, who challenged him to a struggle. They fought all night, after which the stranger declared that Jacob would be known as Israel, he who prevails with God. Genesis 32:28. Scholars believe that the story carries a special meaning. Just as Jacob had struggled with God, so too would the nation of Israel wrestle for centuries with its obedience to the Lord. Jacob then re-entered Canaan and built a house for his family near the village of Succoth, a variation of Sukkah, meaning tents. Genesis 33:17. This town has been tentatively identified with a site near Tel Deir Allah, north of the Jabbok River and east of the Jordan. As Genesis 37 begins, Jacob's sons are grown men and spend much of their time in the field, tending their father's herds of sheep, goats, and cattle. Observing the common seasonal migrations, the brothers regularly moved from one valley to the next. It's also becoming obvious that Joseph is his father's favorite, the firstborn of his beloved wife Rachel, for Jacob has given him a magnificent long robe with sleeves. This is an unheard of luxury in a family of shepherds who usually take to the field in sleeveless tunics, patched and torn, that are not likely to catch the eye of any passing Canaanite girls. His brothers are understandably jealous and firmly resolved that their brother needs to be taught a lesson. They quietly await an opportunity to put him in his place. To make matters worse, Joseph starts to have some very strange dreams. "Listen to this dream that I dreamed," Joseph tells his brothers in Genesis 37:6. "There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright. Then your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." These visions suggest that Joseph's station is high above that of his brothers, who are not amused. Indeed, they hate him even more. Genesis 37:6-8. But Joseph is oblivious to this. In fact, when his father tells him that his brothers have taken the flocks north to pastures near Shechem, Joseph is eager to follow them. As it turns out, the shepherds have moved on to Dothan, some 20 miles distant. Here the brothers plot to kill Joseph. He is stripped and thrown down into a dry cistern, whereupon the brothers debate what to do with him. Some 15 miles north of Shechem was the major city of Dothan, which straddled the main trade route leading through the Jezreel Valley to Egypt. And as it happened, a caravan of traders was just then passing by. "Come," said Judah, "let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him." Genesis 37:26. The name Ishmaelites refers to the descendants of Ishmael, meaning Arab tribes. With its sense of justice, Genesis makes the subtle point that just as Ishmael was sent as a fugitive into Sinai, so too would his descendants send Joseph as an enslaved person to the great kingdom on the Nile. But what will Joseph's brothers tell their father? They decide that Joseph has had an unfortunate accident. A goat is slaughtered and its blood is spilled on the precious ribbons of Joseph's garment. The piece of evidence is rushed to Jacob forthwith. A wild animal has devoured him. Jacob wails and collapses in grief. He is inconsolable. "No," he says gravely, "I shall go down to Sheol, the grave, to my son, mourning." Genesis 37:35. The caravan traders took Joseph to Egypt, where he was put to work in the house of Potiphar, a captain of Pharaoh's guard. Joseph soon won his master's trust and was put in charge of the household. But Potiphar's wife was attracted to Joseph and tried to seduce him. When Joseph declined her advances, she covered her tracks by denouncing him to her husband. Joseph was promptly thrown into prison, where he met two prominent inmates, the royal baker and the cupbearer. One night, these men had disturbing dreams. The cupbearer saw 3 branches. "Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup." The baker, meanwhile, dreamed of 3 cake baskets poised on his head, and birds were eating from them. Joseph accurately explained their meaning. The cupbearer would be restored to his position, but the baker would be put to death. Genesis 40:10-14. 2 years passed, and then Pharaoh himself had a dream. He saw 7 fat cows coming out of the river, which were devoured by 7 thin cows. None of the king's magicians could explain the meaning. Fortunately, the cupbearer remembered Joseph's gift for divining dreams. Summoned from prison, Joseph explained the dream as a warning of great famine. Egypt's 7 years of plenty would be followed by 7 years of drought. "Now, therefore," Joseph concluded, "let Pharaoh look for a man discreet and wise, and set him, and let him appoint officers all over the land, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come." Genesis 41:33-35. "I am Pharaoh," declared the king, "and all my people shall order themselves as you command." Genesis 41:40. Thus the enslaved Hebrew, the son of Jacob, became the grand vizier. Joseph succeeded in storing a large portion of the harvests over the next 7 years, so that when the great famine did occur, people from all over the Levant streamed to Egypt to buy food. Genesis 41:57. Among them were Joseph's brothers. They met Joseph but did not recognize him. Joseph then put his brothers to a test. Benjamin, his youngest brother, was arrested for theft. In desperation, Judah, the same brother who had sold Joseph to the merchants, pleaded with the grand vizier for Benjamin's life. Hearing Judah's plea, Joseph could no longer restrain himself. He cried, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." Genesis 45:5. The brothers tearfully embraced Jacob, their father, and all their wives, servants, and livestock were brought from Canaan. With their settlement in Egypt, the story of Genesis come to a close. Now, we will be talking about historical evidence. Let's begin. Archaeologists have searched in vain for evidence of Joseph's elevation to Grand Vizier. a position similar to that of prime minister in Egyptian records. A number of scholars, however, have placed the story in the second intermediate period, circa 1780 to 1550 BCE, when nomadic immigrants from Syria and northern Canaan settled in the Nile Delta. Their power slowly spread, so that by the late 17,000s BCE, they controlled Lower Egypt, pushing Egypt's architecture into exile in the southern city of Thebes. 3rd century BCE, historian Manetho called these nomadic chieftains Hyksos, Hyksos, meaning desert princes. The Hyksos also introduced a new military convenience, the horse-drawn chariot. This is reflected in Genesis, which says that Pharaoh allowed Joseph to ride in the second chariot which he had, Genesis 41:43, because the Hyksos kings were of Semitic origin, with ties to Canaan. They may have welcomed talented young men like Joseph into their administration. And now we're moving on to the next book, the Book of Exodus. Now, all of these books have different meanings in their name. The Book of Genesis means in the beginning. It's the beginning of many things. The beginning of the Israelites, the beginning of the world, the beginning of the Bible, the beginning of the Torah. And now here, the word Exodus, if I completely forgot what it means. It has something to do with like liberation, leaving, being free. Well, let's get off that and let's continue on with our story. Pharaoh's decision to settle Joseph's tribal family in the land of Goshen was an inspired choice. Goshen, or Kosem, as it is called in a 12th dynasty papyrus, was a well-irrigated and highly fertile region located in the northeastern part of the Nile Delta, near Wadi Tumilat, between the easternmost tributary of the Nile and the Bitter Lakes. Goshen offered not only excellent soil for tilling, but also plenty of grazing fields for large herds. It is therefore no accident that the Hyksos capital of Avaris was established close to this territory, and the eastern Nile Delta, since it was here that the Hyksos had first taken power. Indeed, Joseph's family prospered in the lands of Goshen, while their herds ate their fill in the lush and moist fields of the Delta. The Hebrews themselves followed the example of their Egyptian neighbors and began to cultivate the land. They began to assimilate because, as Joseph once said, all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. Genesis 46:34. Other than dates and fruits, the two principal crops grown in the Nile Delta were emmer wheat and barley, used to bake bread and brew beer, both staples of the average Egyptian's diet. This was complemented with lentils, beans, cabbage, and occasionally fish. But then the empire struck back. King Ahmose I, founder of the 18th dynasty in Thebes, invaded the lower Nile Delta and defeated the Hyksos in the north. It is possible that the Hebrews were left undisturbed at first as the armies of the south vented their ire on Avaris and all who had served the Hyksos nobility, but soon the nature of the regime changed. Vowing never again to suffer the humiliation of foreign control of their territory, the new pharaohs became warrior kings who maintained extensive buffer zones around the Egyptian homeland. Large standing armies were raised and strongholds were built all along the eastern border. Now, a stronghold is a place where you defend against other enemies. This can be seen in multiple examples, one of them being an example in the cave game. Here you can see it was used like for an ancient race of builders fighting against monsters. It's pretty much the same thing, but in the real world. Egyptians guarding off from foreign people who were pretty much taking control over Egypt. Now let's continue. The Upper Nile and the frontiers with Nubia. All of this may serve as a historical context for the sudden change in the status of Joseph's descendants. As the book of Exodus opens, a new king had risen over Egypt who did not know Joseph. This pharaoh became concerned that the Hebrews still living in Goshen were too numerous. Exodus 1:8-9. He forcefully conscripted them as slave labor and ordered them to build supply cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. Egyptian records confirm that King Ramses II launched a major military program to reassert Egypt's power in the Levant, including the building of garrison cities such as Pi-Ramses. This city, known as Ramses in the Bible, has been identified with a Tel mound near Qantir, north of Cairo. The king also built a second city dedicated to his personal patron, Atum, called Per-Atum, which is possibly the biblical Pithom. Following the construction of the Aswan Dam in the 1960s, many of the Nile branches that existed in Joseph's day have disappeared, but the region is still among the most fertile in all of Egypt. Today, the fields of ancient Osiris are still planted with the grain that Joseph's brothers once traveled from Canaan to obtain. But hardly anything of Hyksos rule remains. The last monuments of the Hyksos capital were left to crumble until the Nile tributary that was Osiris's lifeline silted up. By then, the name of Joseph was only a memory. And now we're going to be talking about the escape from Egypt. The way how the Israelites managed to leave Egypt and the many miracles God did for them along the way. When the Hebrews continued to multiply, Pharaoh ordered every newborn male infant to be drowned in the river. At this time, a young couple from the tribe of Levi, Amram and Jochebed, had a baby. In order to save their child, Jochebed got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch, then set the baby afloat on the river. Exodus 2:3. Eventually, Pharaoh's daughter discovered the basket. She was overcome with pity and took in the baby, naming him Moses because I drew him out of the water. The Hebrew verb mashah means to draw out. Exodus 2:10. Moses grew up at Pharaoh's court, but he never lost his sense of kinship with the enslaved Hebrews. When he saw an Egyptian overseer beating one of the Israelites, he killed the Egyptian and buried him. Exodus 2:12. Word of this deed reached the ears of Pharaoh, forcing Moses to flee into the Sinai desert and the region of Midian. There he met a young woman named Zipporah, daughter of Jethro. Moses married Zipporah and spent his days tending to Jethro's flocks. According to Genesis, the Midianite tribe traced its origins to a son of Abraham's second wife, Keturah. The book of Exodus identifies Jethro as a priest. This may imply that the Midianites have remained faithful to the God of Abraham. Indeed, it is here that Moses first encountered God in the form of a burning bush. I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt, God said, Exodus 3:7. Moses was charged to lead the Israelites out of bondage. Moses and his brother Aaron traveled to Egypt, but their pleas to release the enslaved Hebrews fell on deaf ears. To punish Pharaoh, God sent a series of plagues to bend Pharaoh's will. The river Nile turned to blood, killing its fish and making its water undrinkable. Thousands of frogs covered the land, soon followed by gnats and flies. Hailstorms ravaged the fields and destroyed the harvest. Whatever remained was consumed by locusts. Then the land was cast in darkness. Some scholars believe that these plagues follow a plausible sequence of events based on naturally occurring phenomena in the region. Only the 10th plague broke Pharaoh's resistance. When God ordered that all of Egypt's firstborn males were to be slain to ensure that God's angels would pass over the Hebrew families, each Israelite family had to slaughter a lamb and brush its blood on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of their homes. This moment, said God, should henceforth be celebrated as the Lord's Passover. Exodus 12:6-11. ¿Me puedes sacar una agua? Yeah. Okay, gracias. That night, the firstborn sons in every Egyptian family were killed. Pharaoh relented at last. Take your flocks and your herds, he told Moses and Aaron, and be gone. Exodus 12:31-32. Until the Israelites were free at last. Overjoyed, Moses led the Israelites of Egypt. But Pharaoh soon had second thoughts. Gracias. He gathered his chariots and gave chase, catching up with the Hebrews near the Sea of Reeds, the actual translation of the Hebrew Yam Suf rather than the Red Sea. Moses spread his hands, and in an eastern wind split the waters. As soon as Pharaoh's chariots tried to plunge after them, the waters returned and Pharaoh's army drowned. Exodus 14:28. 3 months after their departure from Egypt, having overcome many deprivations, Moses reached Mount Sinai. Here, God handed him the tablets of the 10 Commandments, the cornerstone of the law, which was stored in the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark of the Covenant was a sacred gold-plated chest of acacia wood that contained the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. The Ark was kept in various places held by the Israelite tribe until its capture by the Philistines. This convinced King David of the need to build a permanent tabernacle for it in the Jebusite citadel known as Jerusalem, which later became the temple. After its capture by the Babylonian army, the Ark disappeared, though the Ethiopian church claims to possess it and its chapel in Aksum. God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had become tangible. The tribe of Israelite refugees was now a nation, but the journey was not at an end. It would take 40 years before the Hebrews finally arrived at the borders of the Promised Land. They went from Pi Ramses to across the Red Sea, all the way to Sinai, and they had to go 40 years through the wilderness because of their sins. We're going to move on from the rest of the stories in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Leviticus was for the Levites, as the name, the name suggests. And it's a bunch of rules for priests who were supposed to show God to the people. They were a representation of God to the people, but also a representation of people to God. Numbers, has a very boring name. But in the Hebrew version of saying it, it actually means in the wilderness, which is the story of the Israelites wandering in the desert 40 years because of their disobedience and lost trust in God. And lastly, but not least, it's Deuteronomy, which are the last moments for Moses. He dies because of his sins. Now we go on to Joshua, the story of how the Israelites conquered the Promised Land. Joshua is the key protagonist of the settlement in the Promised Land. His name, which means God saves, summarizes the message of the book of Joshua. The choice of Joshua as his successor reflected Moses' realization that the new Israelite leader had to be a military commander rather than a spiritual figure. Joshua had previously shown his mettle in the battle against the Amalekites at Rephidim, and he later formed part of the reconnaissance team sent to explore the lay of the land. Exodus 17:9, Numbers 13:17. But Joshua confronted the fact that as a group of desert tribes, the Hebrews did not wield any of the modern weaponry that their opponents in Canaan possessed. That the composite bow and the war chariots that had revolutionized warfare at the dawn of the First Iron Age, 12,000 to 1,000 BCE. Instead, the Israelites needed to rely on military cunning and strategic acumen, which they used to great effect in the sieges of Jericho, Hazor, and many other Canaanite strongholds. The conquest of Jericho. In Jericho, for example, Joshua and his troops marched around the walls of the city for 6 days, accompanied by priests blasting away on their war horns. On the seventh day, the walls fell down flat. Joshua 6:20. During excavations in the 1950s, British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon, again, I apologize if I didn't say that correctly, uncovered some of Jericho's massive 6-foot thick walls, but she determined that these had been built in the Neolithic era, 8,000 to 600 BCE, thousands of years before the putative Israelite settlement. Jericho was again a flourishing city during the Middle Bronze Age, but its final destruction occurred between 4000 and 1550 BCE. Next, Joshua focused his conquest on the hill country, knowing that the deep and lush valleys beyond the Judean hills would be fiercely defended. He used a ruse to capture the city of Ai. I read that wrong. To capture the city of Ai, now identified with Khirbet el Magatir, located some 12 miles north of Jerusalem. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they may know that I will be with you as I was with Moses." Joshua 3:7. This is a beautiful verse. The battle for Hazor. The Hebrew commander then swung north, where King Jabin of Hazor had also been created a defense coalition. This time consisting of all the northern kingdoms in Canaan, Joshua 11:1-3. At its peak, Hazor had a population of more than 15,000, with active trade links throughout Egypt, Anatolia, and Syria. It also boasted one of the most sophisticated courts in Canaan, with singers and musicians, whose excellence was praised in some of the Mari tablets. Not surprised. Hold on, wait. I think 45, 46. Not surprisingly, the Bible calls the ruler of Hazor the king of all Canaan, Judges 4:2. One of the tablets found at Hazor refers to a king named Ibni Adu, which is etymologically similar to the name King Jabin in the Bible. But Joshua was able to defeat Jabin's northern alliance and burned Hazor to the ground with fire, Joshua 11:10-11. But in the 1950s, renowned archaeologist Yigael Yadin discovered the physical traits of soot and burned stone among the excavated remains of Jabin's palace, which he identified as evidence of the biblical account. Recent attempts to ascribe this destruction to Egyptian or Philistine forces, or perhaps an internal uprising, but compelling Wait, I read that wrong. To Egyptian or Philistine forces, or perhaps an internal uprising, are compelling but have as yet failed to provide any substantive evidence. Most scholars believe that the emergence of Israelite settlement in Canaan was probably a gradual process of infiltration that only occasionally resulted in an armed conflict. This, we should remember, was a period of great instability. The Israelites happened to be one of the several migrating people, including the Philistines, passing in and out of the region, thus weakening the ability of local Canaanite cities to respond. One can imagine that the story of the settlement was later telescoped into a hero saga, buttressed by great military victories in order to affirm the legitimacy of Israelite settlement in this volatile region. And we've gone through the books of the Torah and through the book of Joshua. I would love to continue more, but we are reaching the end of the time for my preaching. So on the next time we will talk about the judges, and we will talk about Samuel, and possibly, if we have the time and the chance, we will talk about David. But for now, that's all I have for you today. May the Lord God bless you, may the Lord God keep you, and may the Lord help you in all your troubles. God bless. Have a nice day.
Pon otra vez el inicio, mismo. Pon el inicio y luego lo apagamos.
Hiding from the rain and snow, trying to forget but I won't let go. Looking at a crowded street, listening to my own heartbeat. So many people all around the world. Tell me, where do I find someone like you, girl? Take me to your heart, take me to your soul. Give me your hand before I'm old. Show me what lovers haven't got a clue. Show me that wonders can't be true. They say nothing lasts forever. We're only here today. Love is now or never. Bring me far away. Take me to your heart, take me to your soul. Give me your hand and hold me. Show me what love is. Be my guiding star. It's easy. Take me to your heart.